Thanks for joining us for today's edition of the Rubin Special. We are here with my old friend, Tom Ferry, business coach extraordinaire, plugged into the real estate industry like none other, coaches top agents, realtors, broker owners around the world, has over 100,000 followers on Instagram and nearly 300,000 on YouTube. Tom, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Backstory, parents got divorced when I was really young, and probably like anybody else that goes through a situation like that, you either step into it or you shrink from it. I stepped into it.
Right.
Decided that I would be the leader of the family and basically have not stopped. Barely got through 5 high schools, was a really focused kid, just on the wrong stuff, right? So finally figured out what really resonated for me was moving people forward. Now, I used to do it like getting people to like bail on high school and go to parties. They were moving forward, just the wrong direction.
Right.
Then it became, hey, I really like the fact that you can help somebody go from A to B in their life or their business. But when you're young, you have no experience, you have no skills, you have no tools. So I spent, the better part of a decade just trying to figure out on myself and a few others, these experiments, can you systematically figure out a way to get somebody from point A to point B to point C? And then I actually started talking about it. So it took me a good decade, call it, 7,000 or 8,000 hours of testing before I felt I can do this professionally.
Yeah. I know your dad was doing it, right?
So if you look at the lineage, it's a guy named Napoleon Hill wrote Think and Grow Rich.
Sure.
His
classic book.
Unbelievable book, written in the, actually in the kind of late 20s, published in the early 30s. It was the study of the 500 most successful at that time men, which, whatever at that time, most successful men in business. And, his mentor, the author, exposed him to all these people, and he was able to sit down and basically codify and synthesize what were the 12 things they all had in common. Then he published that book. My dad's mentor, Earl Nightingale, basically worked under that guy, studied his book. It was the answer to every question he had. My dad went to work with that guy in like 1968 by mistake, became his best salesperson, his protege. 74, I think he was fired.
And your dad was fired by Nightingale.
Yeah, probably the best thing that ever happened to him, right? Like as Lee Iacocca, best thing that happened was getting fired, right? And going to Chrysler. He gets fired, and he says, I'm going to pick one industry that I can go into that I could really impact. And it happened to be residential real estate because my grandmother was an agent, my mom's mom. He got in the business, sold 50, 60 homes his first year in the business, knocking on doors in Huntington Beach, California, and the rest is history.
Huh.
Yeah.
So your dad started off with Nightingale as a salesman.
Yes.
Got fired. And then because his mother-in-law was a realtor, what market was she in?
Huntington Beach, California.
So she was in Huntington Beach.
Yep.
So your grandmother introduced your dad to the business.
He was exposed to it earlier because the backstory of how he got into work for Nightingale was actually in the western states of the U.S., everywhere in the country there's title insurance.
Right.
But in the western states, you have title sales reps that actually go out and talk to agents and try and win those title orders, where on the eastern states, New York, et cetera, it's kind of handled through the closing attorney, et cetera.
Right.
So he's a title rep in Huntington Beach, California, working Orange County area. And he actually gets exposed to this guy, Giles Kavanaugh, longtime family friend. And can you imagine walking to somebody's office? It's 1968. At that time, my dad was probably, early 20s, right? 25.
Starting out his professional
Starting out in his career. And the guy has a record player in his office. Now, I have a record player in my...
Like a phonograph player? With the horn?
Not the full horn, but yes, I like that. Record player. And as he walks in, the guy's listening to a record, but it was a motivational message, right? And it was by this guy, Earl Nightingale. So he's sitting there, and the guy's like, hold on a minute. He's just listening. Is he okay? And he takes it off, and he says, you ever heard that guy before? My dad said, no, I've never heard that guy. Like, who is that? I really like that message. He goes, well, that's Earl Nightingale. And what we now know is Giles Kavanaugh actually had a franchise, the rights to sell this material.
So he was like the distributor of Earl Kavanaugh's recordings.
Exactly. And so my dad said, my goodness, like this information could actually motivate an unmotivated person to go out and do something to make more sales in real estate. And that would help, of course, further his title career. So what did he do? He told every person he could find, you got to buy this record. And imagine, can you imagine saying that? You got to buy this record.
Yeah.
And agents were buying the record. Well, so he, of course, you got to call Giles. Giles is the guy, right? The agents are calling Giles. Giles is making more sales and more money than he knew what to do with. He's sitting down inside Giles' office one day, and Giles says, envelope, hands him a bunch of cash. And he's like, what's this? He said, well, these are just the referral fees.
Right, the residuals or whatever.
Whatever. Like all the people that you sent my way. He's looking at it, he goes, this is more money than I make at my current profession.
Wow.
And Giles says, I got something better for you. Hold on a second. Probably like this.
Yeah, right, the rotary dial.
Right? Yeah, and gets on the phone and goes, I've got him here. Hands him the phone, and the voice on the other end, hello, Mike. This is Earl Nightingale. He was like really deep, great voice.
Right.
And my dad goes,
classic radio voice.
That's bullshit. Click, and he hangs up.
Your dad hung up on Nightingale.
Up on him. And of course, Giles is, ghost white, recalls again, sorry, sir, actually, no, Mike, it's actually Earl Nightingale. Hands on the phone. Fast version is, Earl then takes my mom, and my older brother was not born yet. So it must have just been the two of them, flew out to Chicago where his headquarters was, and he said, you were the most successful salesperson we've had in our business in the last 90 days, and you don't even work for us. Go do it again in the next 90 days, and if you do, I'll give you a free franchise.
Wow.
And he blew through the 90 days and did even better and got his franchise, and then so very quickly became salesperson, then sales manager, then helping run the organization. And the better he got on stage, the more I think Earl was a little bit threatened. And it finally said, hey, Mike, whose name's on the door?
Right.
It says Earl Nightingale. I said, you need to go to something else.
Huh.
He fired him.
And so,
yeah.
So he fired him, and then he got into the real estate business?
So Earl's great advice was, I'm letting you go. Go pick a profession that you can master, and then go build your career around that.
Wow.
So he went into real estate, right? Because he kind of understood it, right? From being on the title side and then family in the business.
Yeah. Went
in, did really well, and then launched his speaking career in 1978.
Huh.
So I was 8 years old when he started. It made no sense to me. Right? All I knew is, like Legos and, Kiss, the band, right?
Right.
And having fun as an 8-year-old in Southern California. But, every summer when because my parents were separated, I'd be at his house and I'd go in the garage that had one car over here and then this giant, room with all these shelves of all these audio cassette programs that he was now selling of his own material at his events. And I'm like, hey, Dad, I'm here for the summer. Like, what are we doing? He's like, well, you're going out to the garage to ship tapes.
Wow.
So I'm, shipping tapes and making a couple dollars, but it didn't really connect until I was probably 18 years old when I finally realized I was at that point now living in an apartment in Costa Mesa, California, Center Street, arguably the single worst street you could live on. But what else? Who else is going to rent to a kid like me with a mohawk and ride my little Honda motorcycle? And so I got my place. But I had not talked to my dad in about a year and a half at that point.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, just life, he had kicked me out, whatever the experience was.
Right.
I reached out to him and said, I miss you. Come to my apartment. And he pulled up Josh in a brand new Rolls Royce, and he pulled it right in front of my Honda 125cc lawnmower on wheels.
Sure.
And I thought to myself, maybe he's doing something right.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something I can learn from this guy. I know he does those tape things. And it was interesting just in that moment, probably like anybody that's done anything in their life has had that moment where you go, oh.
Yeah, the aha moment.
Yeah, I'm going right. I should be going left.
Yep.
And suddenly left looked really appealing. And at least I had an early roadmap to say, how did it work and what did you do? And,
When you were 18, your dad pulled up in his new Rolls. You had the aha moment. What then?
So the interesting thing was the next day I was working, the next week, I want to be just the timeline. The next week I'm working at that time, midnight to 9 at a grocery store. And that's when you let the purple mohawk guys work,
Sure.
Go ahead, man. Just stock the shelves, but don't see any humans.
Yeah.
Right.
No interaction with customers.
No. And I'm doing my thing, and energy is you know me. Like energy is not my issue.
Sure.
Hard work is not my issue. I didn't come from money. My dad became successful much later on in life. The Rolls Royce was leased. It wasn't paid for. he was probably, living in I remember where he was living. He was living in a house like this, had a car like this, right? Where most people would be the opposite. So just to paint the picture appropriately. But I remember sitting there midnight to nine, shocked, doing my shelves and opening up boxes and putting up cereal boxes. And I looked at the guy next to me, and he's like 30, and he was old. When you're 18, like 30 is old. Ancient. You with me?
Yes.
And I thought, you know what? God bless that guy for doing what he's doing, but that's not me. Right? And
you didn't want to be that.
No, and I still know that guy today. So I'm like, look, man, that's not my path. I said, you know what? There's maybe something to this thing that my dad's doing, and I've never been one to play small. I've never been one to think normally. I don't think about doing things little, right? So I'm like, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna run his company. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know how many people he had. Did he have employees? Did he have revenue? What was his value? I knew nothing. I just said, look, if I'm going to do something, I'm going right to the top seat.
Yeah.
So the next night he comes in, dressed like you, handsome, coming actually, I remember from New York City, lands in LA, shows up at the grocery store. He pulls in and he's like getting milk or whatever, whatever we do as husbands. And, and I run up to him and I'm wearing I think I'm wearing a, exploited t-shirt. You know what I mean? Like the mohawk going, hair's all flying. And I'm like, Dad, I want to run your company.
Boom.
And he was like, when the drugs wear off, come talk to me.
Yeah.
And the joke is I waited 3 or 4 hours. I shaved my head and I showed up the next day and actually pitched him on, show me the steps of your business. I'll learn put me at the bottom.
Every angle.
I will sweep floors. I will do whatever it takes, but I know I don't want to be that guy.
Sure.
Right. And nothing against that guy. I just didn't want to do that in my future. So I set this intention of 5 years. It took me 9 years to get there. By the time I took over, we were at call it $6.5, $7 million in revenue. Mm-hmm. And I basically I learned everything, but I had a playbook I wanted to run.
Yeah.
And probably just like any professional coach, a football coach, a baseball coach, right? You've been battle tested losing. And then you finally figure out there's a set of plays you could run that would work. And when I came in, I basically started running those plays. And in 4 years, we went from $7 million to $50 million in revenue.
5-0.
5-0.
Wow.
And look, when you're a family-owned business, and the margins were good, you go from 7 to 50 million. 3 years into it, he called me and said, I'm going to go just play golf every day that ends with Y. Keep up the good work, kid.
Yeah.
And we grew that family business. And then, 5 years into it, it was just time for me to go run my own deal.
Yeah.
Right? So it's been a fun story, and I'm super grateful for mentors and coaches and friends and obviously my dad and my stepmom, and people that guided me along the way.
They provided the foundation.
100%.
Yeah. So today we're at Frankie and Johnnie's.
Yeah.
And it's a classic New York restaurant.
Yes.
It's actually one of the oldest restaurants in New York City. It's been in business since 1926. Can you believe it?
That's crazy.
It's almost 100 years old.
Yeah.
It's a classic steakhouse here in the Theater District on 46th Street.
Yep.
So I'm glad you could join us today because, what's better in New York than steak, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So here's a menu. Why don't you have a look?
We got a handsome guy here who's ready to take our order. What do you recommend, sir?
Go for the steak.
Thank you.
Steak.
Go for the steaks?
Yeah.
Any specific steak you recommend?
You can go for either ribeye or sirloin.
Okay.
For two of you, you could have taken porterhouse or his tomahawk ribeye is really good here.
He's a top producing salesperson, so having a big old ribeye at lunch could put him into a coma. What about something like a fillet? Something. I mean, I love steak, but it's maybe something on the lighter side.
What do you want? Fillet? You want fish?
No. I'll take a steak fillet for sure.
I'll make a suggestion.
Yeah.
Why don't we do the porterhouse for two?
Oh, there you go.
And we can do it medium.
Medium.
Perfect.
And then we'll eat what we can eat.
Yes.
And
I'll take the bone on the airplane. Do they allow that?
It might be a violation of TSA policy.
How about some greens?
Yeah, I was going to say start with a Caesar salad.
Yeah, I can share that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then on the side,
some sides.
Yeah, we'll have the string beans.
Yeah. So
and and broccoli and the mushrooms and onions.
Okay. Wow. Man,
thanks, sir.
Is that good for you?
Yeah.
Have some drink.
I'm good with water.
Yeah, I'm good with water.
Thank you.
I'm bad with that, but still I can live with that.
Yeah. So how did you pick this restaurant over all the other restaurants in the city?
Because this is a classic New York restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And the basis of the Rubin Special series
Mm-hmm.
is to visit the classic New York institutions. And have my friends join me for lunch.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
Really happy that you can do it.
Yeah, thank you.
So you're growing the business.
Mm-hmm.
You got it to $50 million, and you saw that in order to continue to grow,
Mm-hmm.
which is really what you were born to do,
Yes.
you're going to have to do it on your own.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the transition from your dad to your own independent thing.
So the first thing I want to be very clear, like, working inside a family business, and I counsel and coach and work with and consult for a lot of family businesses today, mainly on the mistakes to avoid, right? Because, look, my father and I did not have any classic training. We are both two bullheaded, very focused individuals. So probably like the Beatles, they just couldn't last together.
Sure.
So we went as far as we could, and we ended on good terms. I describe it as we got a divorce, right? I mean, we had all these assets together, and we had built this big business. And I basically said, look, you have all of that. This was all under your umbrella. This was your world. Thank you for paying me some shekels along the way. You take this. I'm going to go do my own thing. That was a really easy conversation to have with him. A little more challenging with my wife when I got home. But I will tell you, there is magic in being hungry. There is magic in being, I don't want to say desperate, but being so intensely focused on producing a result that, like, your back's against the wall. You either kill or you die.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in that mode intentionally. So we started our business, and I went immediately out. Now I've got no revenue, no clients. I am a
starting from scratch
startup now. I'm established. I've got a brand in the marketplace, but it's very small. And my promise was I wasn't going to call any of his clients because I'm in the same space, right? So unlike some people, when they leave a business, they basically rape and pillage from their existing company. My deal was take the high road, love on my family, keep doing your thing, right?
Yeah.
I'm leaving 155 people that worked for me. I was the president, of the company. I don't want to hurt them. I certainly want to hurt my dad.
Sure.
So let's go start from ground zero, ground and pound. The first year was...
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Take a step back. What year was this approximately?
That was so we launched January 22nd, 2004.
Got it.
So in anybody that's paying attention, you can figure out pretty quickly, 2004, 5, 6 were pretty good.
Yeah.
But the middle of 2006, because I'm coaching so many people across the country, I'm listening to all the signs. I'm talking to all the mortgage banker companies. I look like, you got a loan. The sort of the joke of dancers in Vegas that own 16 properties that nobody's living in, but the appreciation's going up.
Right.
Anybody with common sense knew there was a recipe for disaster.
Unsustainable.
So in 2006, I'm looking at my own business, and at this point, we're now doing $10 million a year in revenue. We went from zero to across probably one of the most important thresholds of any startup company, getting above $1 million, then getting above $10 million in revenue. We're there, but I'm looking and I see the world is about to fall apart, right? We're about to go off the cliff. And the interesting part in reflection is I was out telling the world what to do, but I didn't take care of my own house.
Huh.
And I was actually just interviewed on this subject where it was very evident, like the biggest mistake I made is I'm telling CEOs of companies that I'm consulting for, right? Your CEO, the market is shifting, the world is changing. I'm calling on banks trying to figure out who their REO department head's going to be when they had no REO department head.
Right.
They were like, what are you talking about, Ferry? I'm like, hey man, I'm just looking at the numbers. Like, this thing is not adding up. So I was ahead of the curve there.
Please.
But I failed to do it in my own business, right? So we took a hit, the world took a hit, everybody took a hit. But I tell people all the time, like, you have to have the massive breakdown to create the big breakthrough.
Yeah.
The best thing that ever happened to my business was 2007, 8, 9, right? The worst thing that happened to a lot of my friends was 2007, 8, 9. But as a business owner, as a CEO, what I saw was tremendous opportunity in the rubble to help people rebuild. And metaphorically, the phoenix from the ashes was, like, as silly as that sounds, that was my mindset. Like, I'm going to help a ton of people come out of this. And it was great because I had to clean my own house and help everybody else. So it was an interesting couple of years. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, thank God we're beyond that, but lessons learned, right?
Well, you know, let's hope. And it's
Yeah.
interesting that you mentioned the phoenix from the ashes, because it strikes me as a combination of that, but prefacing that, it was a little bit like Icarus.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, Tom Ferry is Icarus
Yeah.
flying toward the sun, thinking, you know, nothing can
I'm
harm
invincible.
you. Nothing
Yes.
can harm you.
Yes.
And then next thing you know, this calamitous event happens throughout the world, and it reverberates. And you know, frankly, everybody was caught in it, regardless of whether you were involved in real
Yes.
estate or not.
Yes.
It affected all industries. It affected all
Yep.
countries. It was really a global
Yes.
recession.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, where do you see the market going? I mean, you know, you and I have been working together for, you know, the majority of my career and the majority of your independent career.
Yes.
And you're always plugged in to what's on the horizon, both near and far. Where do you see things going in the next 1, 3, 5 years domestically?
So here's the data points. If anybody looks online and you do enough research, you know that I'm plugged in with a lot of economists. We're having a lot of conversations. Bank of America is one of my partners. Therefore, Merrill Lynch is one of my partners. So whether it's them or the National Association of Realtors or Pulsonics, Steve Harney, Keeping Current Matters, everybody is saying the same thing. The next 18 months is about as far out as anybody can see intelligently, right? That they're comfortable saying, in the next 18 months, this is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, everyone's saying the same thing. In the next 18 months, nothing's going to happen. On the other side of 18 months, the concern is a recession, right? Not because of the current president, not because of inflated stock markets, not because of real estate housing, not because of, it's because since 2010, right, we've been in a bull market, right? And every bull market has to switch to a bear market. It is what it is. Now, what does that mean for residential real estate? If you look back over the last 6 recessions, and remember, recession by definition means we had 2 quarters of the GDP go backwards back to back, right? 2 down
Contracting
quarters,
GDP.
back to back. That's all it means. Of the last 6, only one of them, the 2007, 8, 9, 10, obviously negatively impacted, but that was a housing crash that impacted the rest of the world, right? Every other one, 2001, the early 90s, these had very minimal, if any, impact on housing. It was everything else going on.
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting now when you talk to all the economists, we know we're at the end of a bear market, right? You look across the country right now and you say there's basically 3 tiers of pricing. The upper end, the luxury market in any city, right? The luxury market, there's more inventory, prices are softening, list prices are coming down, buyers and sellers are negotiating a lot more. You're certainly seeing that in the city. The middle tier pricing across the country, a nice home that's compelling, sells very quickly.
Yep.
Everything else is sitting. And then the bottom 1/3, they look at the rest of us and say, what are you guys talking about? I list a house, I hit enter in the MLS, and it's gone in 2 seconds. Everyone is saying that's going to remain the same for the next 18 months, and even as far as 3 years, only because you got 80 million millennials that are now looking to buy a house. The biggest problem we have right now in the U.S. is we don't have inventory to sell them. Right? Whether we've outpriced them in certain marketplaces or the building costs are so high today that if I'm a builder and I go out and I take a piece of land in Boise, Idaho, low cost housing, great quality of life, low cost, Californians are going there, right? Nonstop and saying, hey, this is just a better deal. Here's the thing though. If I've got that plot of land and I could build, 200 inexpensive first-time buyer houses, right? My cost and profit isn't the same if I build 75 really nice houses. That might be $400,000 there, as an example.
Yeah.
So you've got all these things happening. The Feds just basically said, we're not raising rates for the rest of this year, so that's nice. 3 years from now, 5 years from now, if I had to bet, and this would only just be speculation, that the power of this device, we're going to push a button and magic's going to happen, right? That whether you look at the current trend of iBuyers happening in real estate, which has 0 impact in New York City, it's the middle of the road, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, average house in America, and there's a lot of them. There are institutions, publicly traded companies, privately held, well-funded REITs and everything else that are buying those things direct from consumers for 92 cents on the dollar. I think that trend's going to continue. I think that there is a segment of the market, no one knows how big it is yet, but there's a segment of the market where there's just people that just say, look, I'm used to DoorDash, order food, and it shows up.
Right.
I don't want an agent at my house. I don't want to, I don't want to go through that process. Today, that's 0.00001% of the market.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't shock me that, I want to preface, we're not talking about a New York City marketplace. We're not talking about a Miami marketplace. We're not talking about San Jose, California, Silicon Valley. We're not talking about luxury property, but middle of the road, turn and burn stuff. I think they're going to be impacted. I think the consumer is going to be surprised and delighted, and I think some agents, they'll have to pivot and adjust.
So are you saying that the traditional brokerage model is going to be impacted by the iBuyer and go the way of the travel agent?
No, not at all. It's actually the opposite. What's going to happen is the DIY sites, the do-it-yourself sites, the FSBR.com, ForSaleBanner.com, etc. That market's never been higher than 8%.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, the buy box of these companies today are 91 or 92 cents on the dollar. So you're going to sell your apartment, off West 17th. That's worth $3.5 million. You can take a 91 cents on the dollar offer because you can close it on Tuesday, or are you going to try and optimize the price?
Optimize the price in most cases.
I wouldn't try and sell any of my property, and I own a lot of investment properties. I wouldn't do any of that stuff. What it's serving is that segment of the market that's DIY, do it yourself, right? The vast majority of the industry, right, is going to continue doing exactly what it's doing now. Will the process become better? The people that understand, Josh, and you know this, what consumers want today is experience. We've actually entered the experience economy in real estate, and you see a part of it in the iBuyer, the DIY experience. But if you look at the real market, look at Amazon, right? So Amazon, push a button, product shows up. They have made the experience of buying so effortless. They've removed all of the friction from buying a KISS t-shirt, a pair of Vans, or whatever else, right? The agents like yourself that are understanding and recognizing that is what the consumer expects today, and they're operationalizing around that, creating a better experience. Amazon raised all their prices on all their products. They're no longer the low-cost leader.
It's funny.
With me on this?
I noticed that because I went to buy something, a gift for a friend last week.
Yep.
And I could have sworn that it was going to be not much cheaper, but I thought that it would be more affordable than the retail store.
Mm-hmm.
I had just bought the same product at another retailer, brick and mortar retailer. And would you believe that it was certainly as much as, if not more, than I paid by $1 or $2.
Yes.
But if you add up the number of transactions and the overall volume that Amazon does, 10 cents, 50 cents, $1, $2, we're talking about 1 or 2% variation in price. That adds up. So I think Amazon is the future. Yes. But as Jeff Bezos pointed out, even they will fail one day. Mm-hmm. And so in order to sustain the business, you have to continually innovate.
1,000%.
And so how do you see brokerage innovating?
So brokers need to innovate on two fronts, both the agent side and the consumer side. And quite honestly, brokerages need to make a choice. Some of them are intentionally not consumer-centric, right? They are agent-centric, and we can, I don't want to name those brands, but you know who I'm talking about. Like, everything they do is about the agent, and the agent is the brand, right? I believe that right now in the real estate space, residential, right, that there is a myriad of brands that no consumer can tell why this one versus that one versus this one versus that one.
Right.
And they're struggling with their identity today. So I think the one or two that position themselves right with the customer are going to do very well, and they'll always be. You always need a B player,
right?
Right. The world's full of B players, B plus, B minus, A minus, whatever you want to call them. But the brokerage that finally realizes that the customer wants the entire experience here, they want it to be beautiful, they want it to be seamless. They want a great agent who's going to help market, position, and negotiate the highest possible price in the shortest amount of time with the highest net proceeds. They know they need that human touch, that human element that currently no AI or machine learning or algorithm is going to solve for them. But everything else, they want on their phone.
Yeah.
You with me? And when a company gets behind that and truly says we are going to be consumer centric, we're going to speak to the 80 million millennials and the 65 or 70 million Gen Xers and talk about the experience that they want, that's going to be huge. So that's one part. And no one, in my opinion, is currently doing that. And I know all the CEOs.
Yeah.
Right. So let me restate that. No one is doing it on a national level, right? One company right now is doing it in Europe, right, on a national level, but that's a whole different story. On the brokerage side for the agents, I think it's the brokers are realizing that, like I mentioned here, the brokerage does not have a lot of consumer connection, but the agents do. Josh, your Rolodex of both agents that you know and customers you've worked with and prospects that have engaged with you, there is so much value in that. And brokers are finally realizing that the agent, it's kind of like the modern day NBA.
Yeah.
You with me? You're LeBron James, right? And that's either negative or positive for you, depending upon, I'm a Laker fan, so currently I'm a little 50-50, right? but LeBron James is such a star. He is so good at what he does. Even if he's at the end of his career, right? Yeah. He's so good that if he moves from this brokerage to that brokerage, it impacts a lot of people's lives and dollars. You with me? So the smart brokers are realizing that and trying to figure out what are the services I need to create so Josh can just go sell more apartments. So Josh can just help more customers because you're now the star. You with me? It's not the NFL. In the NFL, Josh gets hurt, we just take next man up, right? Yeah. It's not. The NBA is the rock stars, right? Do the most, help the most, got the most star power, and the brokers got to pay attention to that. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because the same can be said for the consumer with the frictionless transaction, whether it be Amazon or whatever the experience might be. Yes. But the same can be said for the agent as well.
1,000%.
So you want to have a frictionless business as a whole. But
but that's a whole other story, team versus individual, and that's a great debate in our space. If I can just interject.
Sure.
In 1993, going back to my dad and I, we walk into a doctor's office, and we're there for a checkup or whatever it is, and we're probably just palling around together because we're buddies. And someone checks you in, the receptionist. Someone else has you fill out this form. Somebody else walks you back to the room. Somebody else checks your blood pressure,
right.
heart,
yep.
And then the surgeon or the doctor comes in and says, I read your chart, this is what we need to do, here's the steps, makes you feel great, and then someone else takes over from there. But in residential real estate, for as long as I've been 30 years in the business, it's generally speaking, it's one agent who checks you in at the door, fills out your form, walks you back, checks your blood pressure, then performs the surgery, then stitches you up, then does post-op. And that is unheard of for me.
Yeah.
Right? When you're talking about the complexity of negotiation and emotion between a luxury buyer and a luxury seller, plus the other agent on the other side, the attorneys, title, the building, the board of the building. There's so many factors happening there. The mistake that I see is these individual agents, and I have a lot of them, so they're all friends. I'm not calling you out. I question how much you can do and how many people you can serve in that model.
Yeah.
Versus building a more repeatable and scalable business where you've got experts in place that are helping along the way make that seamless transaction.
Yeah.
I just made a whole bunch of agents that might watch this angry.
No, not at all. I think that it certainly is a valid point in that each aspect of the transaction deserves a specialist.
100%.
And so what you need to do is break down the transaction into parts.
Yes.
Okay, you're going to handle the pre-listing, you're going to handle the showing, you're going to handle the negotiation, and you're going to handle the transaction coordination.
Showings, listing launch, transaction coordination is where it's at right now.
Right.
Because where do most deals fall apart?
Right there.
Right there,
yeah.
Right? And it's nationally, it's an enormous number, and it's climbing right now. Not so much in the city, but you're seeing it nationally climb where the transaction falls apart because the agent's working on the transaction, then they're launching a listing, then they're working on something else, then they want to be with their kids, then they drank too much the night before, right? And that transaction is sitting here dormant.
Yeah.
That's a scary proposition for buyers and sellers, which again, you wonder why the looming possibility of this becomes so significant.
Right. But along with that comes connectivity and accessibility
Yes.
to
Do
information.
you do every show like this with all the plates coming by? Like I like this. I like this.
Yeah. So, along with the device that you have in your pocket comes connectivity, accessibility, and the impression to the consumer that they are now empowered because they have the information.
Yep.
But there are also other aspects to the transaction that many people don't realize until they're in the thick of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're either in negotiation or they have a contract to review. And that's where the agent really starts to shine. And the value proposition becomes very clear. So it's interesting to me that the occasions that I meet a prospective seller and they've bought their current home, which they're contemplating selling, without the help of a valuable broker who really becomes a partner in the transaction.
They chose a house and said, "Can you write this up?"
Basically. Or worse still, they went to the seller's agent who was representing the seller.
Which is crazy.
And, and that agent is there for one reason and one reason only, and that's to get the seller the most money. So the buyer is essentially going unrepresented. So it's essentially like them going through, God forbid, a divorce and working with their spouse's attorney. In those cases, the consumer realizes after the fact that the thing that they traded for the efficiency and dealing directly with the seller's agent was in fact value. And at the time, they thought that they were doing the right thing and paying the right price. But then when they turn around to sell it in 3, 5, 8, 10 years, they realize, you know what, I probably could have bought this for less if I were working with a qualified agent. So
someone who's just negotiating on my behalf.
Right.
That's it. I mean,
Right.
100%.
And so that continues to happen with the accessibility and the information that's available to the consumer. That same person ends up forgetting about the value of having representation, and instead they think that it's going to add friction, it's going to create less efficiency and added cost, when nothing could be further from the truth. So what would you recommend the consumer do going forward with this information, and it can help them or hurt them?
So I want to just interject. I'm an investor in a company that's doing machine learning and early in AI. What you do, it's like the gold miner who could walk over and touch the ground and then lick the pick and say, "There's gold here."
Yeah.
That magic is what a good broker has. The ability to flesh out, this is a serious buyer, this is a good agent, this is a bad situation. That little secret sauce.
Sure.
And unfortunately, that's not teachable.
No.
Right? You either have it or you don't. It's not something you're going to read in a review on Zillow, or what I mean? You're just not going to, like, you know. Right?
Yeah.
So the question is, what should a consumer do today? The studies from the National Association of Realtors, I'll always turn to data first, and then I'll give you my opinion.
Sure.
So the data says, post a transaction, the National Association of Realtors, right, this governing body of real estate, they'll survey customers and say, "How was your experience with Josh?" And everyone basically says overwhelming, unbelievable, and then you got the outliers where it was a bad transaction.
Sure.
7-10%.
Right.
Then they ask this question: will you work with Josh again? Yes or no? And the last time I saw the stat, it was like mid-80s said, "I will absolutely work with Josh again." Take a stab at the percentage of consumers that actually do.
20%.
12.
Wow.
12%. So
why do you think that is?
I think it is, there's a lot of factors. You got, first of all, agents are aging out of the business. We're a very mature industry, so that happens. Agents are less likely to follow up with their customers as they should, right? They're too busy hunting for the next one and not thinking about the nurturing of their relationships. So that's a factor. Other companies are coming in and marketing better. Other agents are coming in and marketing better and creating a better degree of separation as to why I should list with you versus somebody else. And look, at the end of the day, this is a relationship-based business. Once you get in, it's a relationship, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't nurture that relationship, you don't deserve that business. So I think there's when you look at the data behind it, there's a whole bunch of reasons, but I gave you sort of the top 3.
Right.
So I will tell you that today, the most important thing that a consumer can do when they're thinking about hiring a real estate professional, rental, buy, sell, investment, across the board, right? It used to be let me call 3 of my friends, right? Hey, who do you like? What do you know, etc.
Right.
And like there is some validity in that, but usually what that does is they say, well, I really like Martha. She's fantastic. Why? Well, because we play bridge together.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that doesn't mean she actually sells houses. I'm not going to pick my surgeon that way, right? Like, and I've actually done this. I had to have a back surgery. I think I told you about this. And even though I was referred by a friend of mine who happens to be the most successful, most well-respected brain surgeon in town, right, in Newport Beach, he said, this is the guy. And he said, heads up, when you Google him, which he understands everybody is going to go to Google first, type in that person's name and type in lawsuit, scam, you know what I mean, reviews, etc. He said, just know that the guy has 0 bedside manner, but he's a phenomenal surgeon. And I went and I read his reviews, and guess what? Guess what every single one of them said? Yeah, not the nicest guy, but unbelievable surgeon. Like everything went perfect, super happy. And it was repeatable over and over again to the point when I met him, I said, you know what your reviews say? And you know, he's, yeah. And I said, all your reviews say you're an amazing surgeon, but you have 0 bedside manner. And he said, which one do you want more right now? I said, I'll take the incredible surgeon.
Yeah.
So the point is, if I'm a consumer today, I'm going to go to Dr. Google and I'm going to type in who sells the most houses in my area, right? I'm going to look at Zillow or others to see the map and look at transactions, right? We're going to look at real data. And then I'm going to look at what are like customers saying about that person. Nobody's looking for perfect. If an agent has nothing but 5-star reviews, right, that's a mistake, right? You screw up, I screw up. Everybody that does a lot of business, you're going to have that one customer that you wish you could have solved it, but you didn't, right? So I literally tell people, if there's too many good reviews, there's probably some BS in there. If there's one or twos, they're a normal human being like the rest of us.
Yeah.
So I'm going to Google, I'm going to look at reviews, I'm going to look at transactions, and then I'm going to interview. And when I interview, what I'm looking for is probably 3 things. First, what have you done, right? What are you going to do? And then at the end of the day, and this is, I know what drives some people nuts, is likability.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be in bed together. It takes 30, 60, 90 days to get the property prepped and ready to be sold or on the market and launched. And then it takes another 30, 40, 50, 60 days to get it closed. We're going to be connected for the next 6 months. So it might be good that I actually like you.
Sure.
I don't have to love you.
Yeah.
But I don't want to avoid you.
No, absolutely. There needs to be some degree of rapport there.
100%.
Yeah. And so, you know, with that and qualifying agents and understanding what goes into it, what do you think makes not a great agent, because that's a little bit of an embellishment, but somebody who's solid?
So interesting. So, you know, I am co-owner in an organization called America's Best Agents. There's 15,800 agents in the United States that sold more than 50 transactions or did more than $20 million in volume. That list then gets carved out to the other list, which is the Wall Street Journal top 1,000 agents in the U.S. So what's fascinating today about the answer to that question is having so much data around the men and women that are in this group. Remember, for context, there's 1.3 million agents at NAR. There's 2.5 million people that have a real estate license, but there's only 15,800 that do an exceptional amount of business. And then there's the cream of the crop, you being one of them. Congratulations again, by the way.
Hey, thank you.
You know, being a part of that list. So here's the thing. They're all in different nooks and crannies of the world, right? In this case, the U.S. There's only a few different business models, agents, or, you know, like single agent versus team.
Right.
You clearly see the teams have completely taken over and helped more customers do more better. They're all, generally speaking, what I would call a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. So they have a tendency to lean into problems, trying to solve it versus reacting to it. The market adjusts, they fall apart. These men and women have learned that they're playing the long game, that it's not just about today's market cycle. I got to understand the market. I got to know what's going on. I got to really inform my customers. The mindset I have is like, these men and women don't wait for their clients and their past clients and their sphere to read a headline and hear about it. These guys and gals are on the streets. They know it before it hits, and they're putting it in their newsletters. They're shooting videos about it. They're informing people with, hey, I want to tell you what's going on in the market, right? Your How's the Market video, ridiculous, right? So good. That's just one little example. They're ahead of it with their customers.
Right.
So their customers feel involved and empowered and understand what's going on, and they're not headline reading, because you and I both know headline reading is just clickbait.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, Michael Jackson's Alien Baby. Click.
Right.
You with me? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Right? Like, and that's happening in real estate, especially as we're going into an election cycle here in the U.S.
Oh, yeah.
You can expect to see a lot more what I would refer to as clickbait headlines trying to confuse people. So again, team or no team, both are successful. Definitely more growth mindset versus fixed mindset, leaning into new technology, leaning into new methodologies. Every one of them has operationalized a more successful way of doing business, and there's a multitude of ways to do it, so there's not one approach, but they become more systematic in their approach. And again, that's what the customer wants. The customer wants the Amazon experience.
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting because whether it's an individual agent or a team,
Yep.
I think the root of what makes a successful agent and what buyers and sellers should look for
Yeah.
is somebody with the right mindset.
Yeah.
And it's not someone who is out there with their pom-poms on the field saying that everything is great regardless of the conditions. But as you point out, someone who is going to be ahead of it
Yep.
and not afraid to tell their buyers and sellers what they need to hear so that they can adapt to current conditions.
100%. It's so funny when you say no pom-poms. I think of like Bill Belichick.
Right.
There's no pom-poms there.
No pom-poms.
Right? But if he was a listing agent, he'd be my listing agent. Right? The guy knows how to win. He's got a playbook that works, and he runs it over and over again, and it's next man up. Right? Do
Yep.
your job. It's sort of
Right.
the world famous Bill Belichick strategy.
Yeah.
But understand this: there is
Careful,
there is a personality element to this business, and what's so great is no one personality is the right or wrong personality. Is the entire family coming?
Yes.
Is this how you eat all the time on the shows?
Well, this is how
Do you make the guests buy just for fun?
this is how we measure a good steak in New York is the porterhouse.
Okay, all right, I feel better now. I understand. See, I'm a Southern California, Newport Beach guy, so do you have any tofu to go with this? It's not appropriate with water if you're in Canada. Bon appetit.
It's interesting that you mentioned the doctor analogy because it's one that I use quite frequently.
You want a big chunk of broccoli?
Sure, thanks. There you go.
To me, it's an excellent metaphor that everybody can relate to, and they don't think about it when it comes to real estate.
Right, because everybody has a different role.
Yeah.
And so when you go to the doctor's office, there's the person at the counter who's checking you in, taking your current insurance information.
Yeah.
Then there's another person who greets you,
Yes.
escorts you back to the exam room.
Yep.
That person may or may not take your height and weight, ask you how everything's going, are you taking any new medications, etc. And they're really trying to sort of qualify and understand. So they're the ISA equivalent, really. They're the sort of intake person. And then, here comes the doctor, and the doctor's in the room all of 5 minutes in some cases, in my experience.
Yeah.
But the doctor bill at the end you're getting, and you're saying, wow, I had to wait a month to see the doctor. And then when I saw him, it was all of 5 minutes.
Yep.
And then I get this bill for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars.
Yes.
And what you're really paying for there is you're paying for the expertise. So with someone like you who's been in the business for over 30 years, you are an expert not only on the brokerage business, but also on the business of mindset, really.
Yes.
And so when you see people...
I want to be cautious to say expert because I hold other people in very high regard, but I'm battle tested. 30,000 hours later of business coaching, and you begin to figure out what works and what doesn't in different parts of the world.
And so are you seeing anything in particular in other parts of the world that is working that you think might be applied here?
I would take, and I'm going to say this, politely, Europe is, I think, the single, like if I was a residential real estate agent today, anywhere in the U.S., and I could move tomorrow, I would probably move to Europe.
Europe,
Right.
But Europe's a big place.
So I would probably go to Switzerland, I would go to Austria, I'd go to Germany, I'd go to wherever my family heritage was. My wife's born and raised in Italy. I might end up in Ireland and Germany, right? Just following the family vibe.
Yep.
And the reason why I say that is in the U.S., we are so institutionalized in our approach to real estate, right? It's 17% of the GDP of the U.S. is housing. I mean, it is a big deal here, as it is in Germany with 80 million Germans. The difference is there. So we just did a study with one of my clients. If you wanted to buy an apartment in District 13 of Vienna, it will take you 6 months to do that. 6 months. Now, someone might in the States might say, well, that sounds like, I mean, if I'm looking and looking. No, I mean, you first of all, there's no multi-list service, so every agent doesn't have access to every property. Secondarily, agents list property there, but there's no buyer representation. So as a consumer, I call you and say, Josh, I'm looking at your apartment here. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1-car garage on X Street, and you say, oh, I don't have that listing anymore. Click. That's the consumer experience in Europe, right? They don't say, gosh, hold on, let me get you on the phone with my other associate here, Adrian. He has 2 listings that match your criteria. So there's almost no cooperation from agent to agent, brokerage to brokerage. So imagine the dysfunction of the consumer experience in that aspect. So if I was going to bet, I'd bet on Europe because there's 700 million people there, right? Taking the whole Brexit aside, right? There's 700 million people there, and the upside is tremendous. So one consideration is you look at like the Australia or New Zealand market. There, they auction the vast majority of their properties. So we all think of auctions in the U.S. Maybe you're at a charity function, or you're thinking of Sotheby's, Christie's. I'm going to buy a piece of art or a car on television. We think of it in that light. But there, what they recognized was consumers basically have an opportunity to come preview a house. They're qualified by a bank. You can buy this home. And whether there's 2 people in the room or 7 people in the room, they do all the bidding right there in real time by auctioneers, and the property sells. There's something to that efficiency. Now, Australia has 36 million people. It's a smaller, it's a huge, country, but it's a very small in terms of population. But I think there's something to that has just simply not been adopted in the U.S. We see it in unique properties. We see it in distressed properties, auctions.com on the commercial side as an example. So I think there's a big opportunity for that. Again, surprise and delight the customer.
Yeah.
I think we're going to continue to see around the world, more so in the U.S., because let's face it, U.S., Canada, the Western world is so innovative together. We're just in various different stages of that evolution. I think we're going to see more and more virtual reality for real estate. I think we're going to enter a phase in real estate where a consumer will put their glasses on or some device, and they'll be in the house. There's already talk of hit a button and you're in the home. I can experience it. If the device is right, I can smell it, I can taste it, I can touch it, I can know what it's like to experience that apartment.
Yeah.
I think as we look at, especially the Manhattan marketplace, where, correct me if I'm wrong, 60, 70, 80% of the people, this is a second home, or they're I don't want to call them non-owner occupiers, they're pied-à-terre, etc. So when we're buying from around the world in a place like Manhattan, I can look at photos, that's great. I can look at videos, that gets a little bit better. But what's beyond the video? How do I experience the home? I think that's going to be a major, major thing. And you're seeing that like in Dubai, right? You're seeing it in nooks and crannies around the world where money and technology have aligned to create a better experience for the customers. But also they have the issue that not as many people are flying in for the weekend.
Right.
I'm not going to train in and say, hey, let's go look at real estate into Dubai. It's a bit of a hike. So I think a couple of those things are going to make a big impact. I think some people are going to figure out, how do we get all the contracts into one centralized hub? And wouldn't that just be nice for me to basically say, okay, I've hired Josh as my broker. I'm going to download all the contracts. I'm going to review them. I'm going to send in my attorney. It's in one centralized location. We've got elements of this, but nobody's figured out the end-to-end contract solution for the customer, connected to their attorney, their advisors, their loan officer, their agents, etc. But a lot of people are playing in that space, so we're going to get there.
That's great. So, what's your favorite food?
My favorite food right now is anything that comes out of the garden at my house that my wife prepares. So
It's funny you mentioned that because recently I've been having a love affair.
Tell me.
And I'm happy to share it with you and as well as our friends. I've been having a love affair with vegetables.
I'm with you.
And there is nothing better than fresh vegetables, especially those from your own garden.
100%.
There's so many things you can do with them, so many nutrients we get from them.
Yes.
And, you know, I've always loved them. In fact, one of my fondest memories is being about 7 years old, and my godmother's garden, she had rows of vegetables. It was like a small private farm, from zucchini to squash, cucumber, green pepper, snap peas.
Yeah, every lettuce you can imagine.
Tomatoes.
Whatever the 3 seasons of vegetables, yeah.
And going out there in the summer and picking these sugar snap peas and just eating them in the middle of the garden. Yeah. I mean, it was just magic.
Yeah. Farm to table, we know, is super hot. But if you again, that experience, that kind of, you could feel it. It warms your heart.
Yeah.
Right? For my wife and I, she said, look, we're redoing a place. The only thing I want is a garden. And I don't live in a very garden-centric environment, probably not unlike New York City.
Yep.
A garden is a big deal. But we carved it out. We made it work. And when I see her walk up with her basket, we live at the beach.
Right.
You don't think beach and garden, right? And, she walks up with this basket, and she's got, 5 different types of lettuces, broccoli, every vegetable you can imagine, and then some. And then the fun of just that experience of going to get the seeds, planting them, nurturing it. It's a metaphor for life. Everything that's good takes time.
Right.
And everything that good, you have to nurture it. You got to love on it. You got to water it. Kids, real estate, life, friendships, everything. Yeah. So how about you? What's your favorite food?
There are so many great foods out there, Tom.
Yeah. Don't you think it's sometimes what city are you in and what country are you in? Sorry to interrupt your interview.
You definitely have to eat local based on where
100%.
you are.
100%.
So, for instance, having grown up in Philadelphia, I can tell you that a cheesesteak is really only a cheesesteak in Philly. And believe it or not, the best cheesesteaks are not at Pat's and Gino's. Sorry, Pat and Gino. But you have to know where you are, keep that in mind, eat within the context of where you are. So,
some of the apps you recommend to find it?
I always use Yelp. I mean, that's just my go-to. But if you can speak to a local and ask them where their favorite food is, that would be great. Pizza's great. It's not very good for you, but I do love a good pizza.
Absolutely. I married an Italian. It's religion, so it's...
Sure. Yeah. Some of the best pizza I've had has been in Naples or Napoli. Went to a local spot there. It was fantastic. New York is known for its pizza, as well as the steak. Pizza. That's right. Totally different. The pizza that you get in Naples is a bit more artisanal in nature, but it's still good.
I don't know why. I don't actually think of New York City and steak. For some reason, I think of Cincinnati. I think of like chili, which is hysterical. But when I think of like Wyoming, when I think of some of those places where you see your steak as you're driving around, right? It's interesting. So New York steak for you. What about Miami?
Miami, Cuban food.
Yeah. I think seafood. I think sushi. I definitely get the whole Cuban vibe just because of the culture. But it's such a melting pot like New York is. I mean, you can touch every type of food group. Parts of LA are very similar. Every type of food group in a 15-minute walk.
Yeah.
What's the food you don't like?
Well,
I'm flipping the interview on you.
I've never been a fan of beets. So
I'm offended by that.
So anything that is a beet derivation, I'm not a fan.
Okay.
Borscht, that type of thing, no thank you.
Okay.
I'm sure there are a number of others. I don't love zucchini. When I was little, I loved cucumbers, and I have bad memories of people confusing zucchini with cucumbers and forcing me to eat zucchini.
Yes.
So, not a fan of that.
We all have emotional issues from our past, Josh. We need to move through. My wife can't eat coconut for the same reason. I think she was 4 and her brother hit her when she had an Almond Joy in her mouth, and she still can't, like, Almond Joy, just, all things coconut are off her list. I'm like, coconut water? She's like, no, I can't do it.
Yeah.
What about pairings? Do you ever talk about wine, cocktails, and sort of that whole mixology movement with food?
You know,
I noticed we're drinking, Perrier or something.
yeah, pairings. I mean, some meals go better with wine, of course. Others go better with beer.
Mm-hmm.
Believe it or not, I get I get the taste for a Coke or a ginger ale on occasion with certain foods.
Mm-hmm.
Last night with dinner, I had a ginger ale.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not a big drinker, but there's definitely nothing better than a glass of wine when you need it most.
Sure. Or the again, right moment, right occasion, right people, right meal.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny for me. I've invested in wine companies. I'm an investor in a liquor spirits business, tequila and bourbon, rye, and just trying to understand how food goes with that. When I was sort of born and raised on food and wine.
Sure.
I never was a beer guy, so food and beer never kind of resonated for me, but food and wine did it when I was 20.
So you're more of a wine lover than a beer drinker.
I'm a wine collector and fascinated by wines from all over the world, and mutual friends that have told us about where to buy and where to go, and just to try and open up your palate. It's like trying different food, trying different wines, and now I'm not much of a drinker either, but trying different spirits, trying to understand, and I actually love more just learning about it, like learning how is a bourbon created and why only in Kentucky, and what's a rye. How does that work in tequila? Understanding Los Altos in the hills of, Jalisco or Jalisco, right? I think it's just fun just to learn about it.
Yeah. Huh. So, Tom, having worked with so many professionals over the years.
Speaking of alcohol.
I know you're super plugged in to so many people. And I just wanted to share my gratitude for what you've done for me as well as the other people in the industry, because you have a little bit of je ne sais quoi, amazing presence. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it.